Good evening. My name is Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety birthday is March the 31st, 1989. And I want to thank your group and your group representative, my dear friend Wallace, for inviting me here tonight. Now, I'd like to explain a few things even before we get started. Number one, I'll tell you, is to help you get settled, and you know that you're settled and I'm not, so just let you know that. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm overpaid. If in fact, if this meeting tonight was for me, you could just sit here and I would leave because I've already been paid, and life's been wonderful. I've spent all day in the hands of both God and AA. I've had the opportunity to work with a man that I've been sponsoring for almost 26 years today. I've spent the afternoon with my dear friend Wallace and his beautiful wife, Bobby Jean. And I can't tell you what a pleasure that is. Wallace and his running mate, Tom, who is not with us tonight, have had me coming down here for over 28 years. And so I'm very pleased with that. There's a few bars in my lifetime that I couldn't even go back to after 2 times. And then to think that I've been invited somewhere for 28 years is just a miracle and a blessing. And I owe all of that to the power of AA and to the glory of God, as I understand it. I'm going to need more than that to settle down. So let me just talk about this for a minute. I came into AA by just the most pressure a young man could come in with. And I say young because I was 43 and I felt like that was young. Certainly too young to give up the lifestyle that I was being forced to give up. And I've been able to stay here ever since because of the power of Alcoholics Anonymous and meeting God along the way. The remarkable thing about that was, before I could meet God, to be a servant of His and to fully place my will and my life in His care, I first placed it in the hands of some of the most remarkable men that work for God. And Wallace was one of the first, and Tom Iverson, and Dave Cook, Steve Mitchell. And those men today know as much about me as my mother did. Probably when they know more, way more. Yeah, a lot more. So I'm probably speaking to the choir. I've spoken down here just a number of times, and I enjoy seeing everybody every time. And I know you from not only here, but from other AA events around the state and even around the country. My good friend Steve Moore and gathered up a bunch of people tonight, and I've just been blessed. We were carried off to a room, and they prayed for me tonight, not to embarrass them, and to do my job, and I'm going to try to do that. So anyway, I'll go ahead and get started. I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in fact, one in good standing. And I say that boldly and for a certain reason, in that I'm a soldier of AA. It has saved my life, and today I don't know of anything I can speak of or be an advocate for more than that. And it's I believe that the promises that were given to me in AA have manifested, come alive, that I've been given that new birth that comes through taking the steps and being able to practice that on a somewhat regular basis. The practice is a word I like to use. I know that the medical profession says that they practice medicine, and I'm an architect. We say in architecture that we practice architecture, and some of our clients say, well, we know you do, you know. we make some errors and have some omissions in our plans. So anyway, I've been trying to practice this way of life. I'm a member of a home group, and I think it's one of the best home groups in the whole wide world. I'm sure you think that as well. We like to joke that our group is world famous, that they wrote a book about us. Our name is Came to Believe, and most good groups have got that little yellow book in their conference-approved library. I came to believe. So we're not that group, but we are a came to believe group. We meet on Tuesdays and Fridays, and we're a big book study group, just as you do here on Mondays and on Mondays, I guess. So anyway, we study the textbook, Alcoholics Anonymous, the first 3 Tuesdays of every month. The 4th Tuesday, we study one of the traditions out of the 12 and 12. And then when there's a 5th Tuesday, we study AA history, just believing that if we don't remember our history, that we'll be doomed to repeat it. We also believe that in our history is the source of our solution, that if we, how can we possibly recover ourselves? How can we possibly help somebody else if we don't know a little bit about what we're doing? So we study AA history. On Friday nights, we're a study group. Our chairperson for the month picks a topic and calls on our membership to share in a general way about their experience, strength, and hope on whatever the topic was. And the last Friday of every month is our open speaker meeting. I know that you have them more often. We have one a month. We get our speakers almost a year in advance. Many of them are from year to year. Wallace has been our October speaker for over 18 years, and will be next month. I'll be flying in from a business trip just in time to get to the home group, just simply because, one, it's where I belong, and two, my good friend Wallace will be speaking for us. So, anyway, I've been sponsored since I knew, even before I knew you had to have one. I'm one of those guys that got here just as dumb as you could be. Just coming off of 30-some years of drinking on a regular basis, and got 3 college degrees and didn't know how to run my own life, and so came into AA and got forced to go to a treatment center. Hated everything about it. They almost had to shoot me to make me leave. That's how the transformation that took place in about 40-some days, and when they forced me out of that treatment center, AA was at the gate and picked me up, and I thought they were going to carry me home. I was actually under the disillusionment of thinking I was going back to that girlfriend. We were going to pick back up somewhere, and those kind of things, and that didn't happen. I got home about 11 o'clock that night. They picked me up. The first thing we did is we went to a 12 o'clock noon meeting, and I learned the new word, nooners. I had been familiar with nooners, but for other reasons, and so there was meetings at 12 to 1. And so we did that, and I thought they'd give me a ride home after that. Nope. We went out to lunch, and then we went and drank coffee all afternoon, and we went to a 5:30 happy hours meeting. I was used to that also. No booze at this one. And so we went to that meeting. I thought we'd go home now for sure. We didn't. We went out for more coffee. And so for sure we're going home soon. But no, we ended up at an 8 o'clock meeting. Back then, most AA was smoking meetings, and I was 3 packs a day back then. And they started at 8 o'clock. So we went to that 8 o'clock meeting. Well, we're going home now. Nope. We went out for more coffee and dinner. And then, lo and behold, we went to something in my area, one of those crazy meetings where they ask you, does anybody here have a problem? And so one of those type meetings, and that was a candlelight meeting. So they finally carried me home at 11 o'clock. My girlfriend that I was looking forward to meet was gone. She was still drinking at the time. She got to drinking and had just left. So anyway, life settled in again through the marriage of me being forced to go to A, and also my desire to go to AA. I had never in my life seen anything like you people before. The textbook refers to us that we are people who would not normally mix, and you couldn't agree with me that anymore. That we were just a odd bunch of people, and I think we can get along and be friends and love each other without drinking. I know some of the people in my groups and the people I met in AA that I wanted to drink with, and then some of them I don't see how we could have. So that being said. But anyway, I was talking about sponsorship, that I have one. I've always had one. I didn't know you could not have one. A man walked up to me and said, I'm Paige. He said, that's so-and-so. I'm going to be your sponsor. And I said, okay. And come to find out, that man had tried to sponsor my father when I was just a boy growing up. He had been my father's sponsor. And then he got me. So anyway, I've had a sponsor ever since that very beginning, and I didn't know you couldn't. And those men have they have never ever misguided me, not one footstep. Now, my problem is I didn't follow the directions. I would listen to them, and I would try to comply with it. I would just think they just don't know what I know, and maybe we got to do that, and I'd take that curve. Sometimes later, I'd learn how to apply the steps and making them in and come back and say, I'm sorry, you were right, I was wrong, and let's do that. Let's do it, give me one more chance. So that's what's happened. I've never had a discussion or a private moment violated in AA with my sponsors. And I have, one of them drank on me and we helped bury him. One of them died on me, and I helped bury him. One of them fired me, but we're still good friends. And my current sponsor is prayed with me this morning. So anyway, I didn't know you couldn't have a sponsor. I didn't know you couldn't have a home group. I've had 4 in my time in AA, and one of them folded, and the other one. It's still going, but I moved because of a sponsor relationship, and then I started a group myself that I'm currently in today. So anyway, I'm a product of sponsorship, good men in AA, and home groups, and men that would carry me through the book, from the front of the book to the back of the book. So I'm living proof that AA works. I go to a church, actually the same church that we have our home group in, and this is about 12 years ago. The minister told me he wanted me to go off with him to a religious Christian workshop that would be more effective than Alcoholics Anonymous, since AA didn't work. And I'm thinking, my gosh, is this man drinking? He's talking to a man whose life's been saved in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and telling me that there's a program that is one up on it, and because AA doesn't work. And so as I began the 12-step hymn in rebuttal and so forth, come to find out his father had been an alcoholic. His father was the same type alcoholic as my father was. He'd come to AA, did nothing but put the bottle down, and then returned back to drink, and did that over and over and over again. Our program is talking about a program of action, and that it only works if we do something about it. The steps won't fix your problem. They won't change the problem. They'll help you live a new way of life. So anyway, I'm certainly not here to preach tonight. I don't speak for AA. I only speak from my own limited experience with trying to live differently, guided by spiritual principles. And so I want to officially start with reading a statement out of the textbook, and then just jump right into my story. This comes out of the book on page 29. And it says, each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. Now, I start there simply because in the beginning you would have thought, being raised up in a treatment center, that education would be critical to knowing how to stay sober and not drink again. And then you would also understand from AA that frothy emotional pills would help when the boss says, please go get some help with your problem. And you would think that would help. And you would think that force or fear would help you get sober as well. And we learned that fear does not solve your alcoholism either. And so what we find out in AA early on is that only God can, that no human power can help me recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And that's the verbiage out of the big book. Yet, in fact, it happens every day somewhere where one man, one woman speaks directly to one man, one woman, and shares that message of hope. And so that's exactly what happened to me. I got forced to come to AA I had an employer say, Paige, your choices are on the table. You can go to federal prison, or you can go get some help that we'll even pay for. We can send you to this high-dollar treatment center. And so, help, prison. I told you that I had trouble when I got here not knowing what to do. And so I said, those two decisions were pretty tough. I said, well, how long have I got to decide, And they gave me 3 days. And I took all 3 days. They sent me home to consider help, a new life, federal prison. And so 3 days later, late, the deadline had gone past. I volunteered for help. And so they sent me to the treatment center. So anyway, to say that alcohol caused the problem in my life is I'm glad that Wallace has let me know that this is a 2-hour meeting, so I'll hurry on in. So anyway, I lost my train of thought. This is sad. So anyway, here I am, being forced to get some help with a problem I don't know I got. See, I don't know what alcoholism is. I've seen the problems that drinking caused in my own family, but we didn't know that my father had alcoholism. We just knew that my father drank too much, and when he did, he would just disappear. He'd be gone for days and weeks at a time. When he came home, we didn't know these adjectives. We didn't know that he came home restless, irritable, discontent, full of shame, guilt, and remorse. We didn't know that. We just absorbed all that. My father would come home bitter and angry, out of money, sick, and forced to quit drinking to come home, and he would take it out on his family. So I didn't see commercials on TV about how drinking was fun and sociable and pretty. What I saw was a father come home and beat his mom. My mom is smaller than BJ. She's about that big, or was. And I've watched that man beat her to the floor, and then my 3 sisters, and then myself. And then my father would just wreck the house. He may go to that corner and use the bathroom, and then he would pass out. My little mom would wake up or get up, fix herself, whatever the injury may be, go around to the children and fix them, clean up the mess, get him off to bed, and put us back to bed. And now, I tell you that, not that was an event that happened in my life. That was a regular event in our lives when we were growing up. That's what my father did. And I would tell you, I mean to not drink tonight, and I mean not to drink the rest of my life. And you can take that to the bank. One of our co-founders said that. They just taught us to do it one day at a time. But again, I could tell you that way back then, I would do the Boy Scout honor type thing to my mom, and I'd say, Mom, I will never drink. I will never treat a family or children the way our father is doing. I would just never drink. And I meant it then, and of course I mean it today. Well, we also hear in AA that alcohol is cunning and baffling and powerful. If you're here tonight, you probably know from your own experience, it is that for some reason, alcohol became Lord and master of our lives. Certainly in my life, that alcohol became more important than that little mom, than my own personal family, and than anything else. Alcohol consumed me, and how and why that happened is I don't know. I don't even think about it. It only comes up in my mind maybe at the podium when I try to tell you how I got started. So I got started with my first drink. We'll talk about that real quick and move on. So I'm 13 years old, living at home, And one summer night, we camp out, 3 other boys and myself, 4 guys out in the backyard. Somehow or another, as poor as we all were, we got enough money, and I don't know how much what that was. We got enough money together to get a 6-pack of beer. We had an older man buy it for us. He went out and bought it, and we also had enough money to get 1 pack of cigarettes. Now, I do know that they was 25 cents for a pack. And I don't know if anybody smokes in here tonight, but they've gone way up. So anyway, we got our 1 pack of cigarettes, and we got 6 Pabst Blue Ribbon beers. They call them PBRs now or something like that. I didn't even know they still made it. One night I was talking, and I said that, and somebody said, yeah, they still make it. So anyway, we got that. We didn't ask for it. We just said, get us some beer, get us some cigarettes. He came back with it. And I do know this from my first drink. Let me tell you this about myself. I love whole milk, and I love peanut butter. And I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I eat them all the time, to this day. If I go home, I got my own gallon jug that I drink out of. I don't put it even in a glass, If you want clean milk, there's a little small carton in there. But my milk's that big one, and I just drink out of it, type thing. I can't tell you when I made my first peanut butter and jam sandwich. I don't remember that. But I can tell you everything about that night that I had that first beer. Now, how is that? That's just the effect it had on me. And so, they say in AA, I've learned this, I've read this, where there's 2 spiritual experiences. One, from the material world through drinking, is a spiritual experience. Beverage alcohol, the Latin for it, it refers to spirits. And the other is, in AA, the transformation that comes about through spiritual principles. And so there's the culmination of that. So anyway, at 13, I had my first drink and smoked my first cigarette. I went on to a near famous night. I became a leader of those men I was camping out with. Remember, we're 13-year-old boys. We're also members of a club, a women's haters club. About 10 or 15 of us in the neighborhood that we had this little club. We had a clubhouse built in the woods. 2 or 3 of the kids had BB guns, and we'd shoot little birds and pick the feathers and cook them and eat them and that kind of stuff. Real men type stuff. I will clarify that not a one of us hated women. I guarantee you, every one of us little boys loved our mothers, grandmothers, and sisters, and maybe some of them little girls that were running around. We'd be hard-pressed to admit it, but we did. Proof of it was we had magazines up in that tree house, hid out, that showed all kinds of things that we had no experience with. We liked it. We knew that. And we would lie about it. And I'm lying way before I became an alcoholic. So we'd be looking at that magazine and we'd say, someone said, I'd like to do that. And somebody else would say, well, I've done that. And somebody said, well, I've done that. We knew they were lying, they knew we were lying, but we'd just keep going. Anyhow, point is, we had this little club, and so we were club members drinking together that night, camping out. Lo and behold, one of our members came over and joined us, came member number 5. What's paradoxical about that is she was a girl, and how she was a member of our little Women's Haters Club, we don't know. Best I can remember, she was a member in good standing. I don't know. So we couldn't explain it then and can't explain it tonight. I'm going to end this story real quick, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you that night I had my first blackout. Things just left here with just that part of that 6-pack of beer. I smoked most of those cigarettes because the other guys didn't care for it. So I became like an early chain smoker type guy. I got into my first major trouble with drinking that night, and I had my first experience with a young lady that night. And I can tell you, when you put those 3 things together, It just transformed my life, and from that moment on to this day, my life has been dominated by that fact about that early experience with drinking. Let me tell you what happened to that 13-year-old kid. I became unafraid. I was afraid of nothing from that moment on. And before that, I was afraid of my shadow. I didn't know that. It looked like I was as fearless as any kid in the neighborhood. Go out at night and play games in the dark, handle snakes and animals and pick them up and do all kinds of things. It just looked like I was fearless. But what I was afraid of was you, and I didn't know that. I was afraid of that. I was embarrassed about who I was. Nobody ever said, man, you're pitiful. Nobody ever said that to me, but I felt pitiful. I had a speech impediment. We were dirt poor. We wore hand-me-down clothes. We had, most of the time, utilities turned off in our home. We'd have to go next door to borrow a bucket of water, that kind of living. So in any case, that went away that night with just that little bit of booze, those cigarettes, and that young lady, and it was just magical. Next morning, knock on the door, and there's the sheriff and the police there. And somebody had shot all the windows out of a National Guard armory with a BB gun. And I'm the guilty guy. It's been reported I did it. I had no defense. To this day, I don't remember loading the BB gun, carrying the BB gun, shooting the windows or nothing. I do know this. I was guilty. I was charged, found guilty. My grandfather, who was wealthy and who did, in fact, take care of us, paid for those damages and so forth and kept me from going to juvenile, they called them juvenile detention centers back there. I don't know what that meant, but it was supposed to be a bad place, and he kept me out of there. So in any case, that was my first experience with drinking. And let me tell you, what I didn't remember was I didn't remember getting into that trouble. I didn't remember the blackout. I didn't remember the problems that came up that night. What I remembered about the fear was gone, that I became fearless. I became good looking, super strong, could do anything and be anybody. And that's what alcohol did for me. The very thought of it would give me a sense of power. The very thought that I would get a drink soon would add power to my mind and so forth. And that's just what kept pushing me on. Now, everything kept mixed together. You know, I went off, did all kinds of things that alcohol allowed me to do. I joined the Navy when I was 17, lied about my age. Took them 3 days to find out. I guess today with a computer they could find out in about 17 seconds. But I was already in the Navy, already at a naval training facility, and so they let me stay. I don't think you can do those things today. I went on and spent a couple of years in Southeast Asia and had that experience. Drank through every bit of that. Ended up doing 6 years on a nuclear submarine. And I'm one of the few men. I'm not going to claim that I'm the only man that ever successfully drank on a nuclear submarine, but I am one of them. I drank for several years and several trips to sea on a nuclear submarine. I was a torpedoman, and I was in charge of the torpedo room. What you don't know about that is we carried 55 gallons of grain alcohol, and we cleaned the gyros, the little machinery that made a torpedo go where you told it to go. We cleaned those periodically with grain alcohol so that they were just perfectly in order. And so I was sitting there one time, and this old sailor said, Paige, do you know what you got in that bucket? And I said, well, grain alcohol for cleaning the gyros. So he said, well, that's one thing we can do with it. He said, did you ever drink Purple Jesus? And I said, well, yeah. We used to go buy 180 proof grain alcohol. And so then we knew I had under my key and my watch 55 gallons of grain alcohol. So I love the Navy. Well, I probably gained everything that the world can give a young man with being able to drink. I got good education when I got out of the Navy. I married into a great family. I married a beautiful young lady. And we had one wonderful son. And alcohol and I got, of course, a wonderful job. And alcohol took every bit of that over the course of time. Now, listen, if it had done it rapidly, you know how if you have a flat tire, boom, 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 and you're off the side of the road and you're just out of luck. If it had happened like that, maybe something would have been different. But it happened so slowly. I just didn't see it coming. I just didn't see. I would joke about things. We had a place at the Outer Banks, and every now and then we'd jump in the car and go. And my wife would say, "Well, how long is this trip going to take?" And I would politely tell her, "It takes about a fifth. It takes me about a fifth of booze to drive through the Outer Banks." Or she might say something dumb like, "Let's cook a chicken on the deck tonight, and I'll make the stuff inside. How long is it going to take you with the chicken?" "About a pint, honey. It takes about a pint to grill chicken on the grill." You know, I just knew what it took to keep drinking. And so I was a daily drinker, starting in the morning to when I would pass out at night. And I had the type of jobs and the family that would allow me to do that. I had some of the best lawyers in the state that were friends of mine that would get me out of trouble. And I want to share one story. I don't normally think about it at the podium, but Wallace mentioned that him and I both carry meetings to the correctional institutions about the state. And we've been doing that, Wallace, a long, long time. And for me, about 28 years. But first time my sponsor carried me to a prison, I'd just flown in from a work assignment, and he picked me up at the airport. And we normally would just get together and ride around, maybe go to dinner, maybe go to a meeting somewhere, something like that, and tell stories and just hang out. And we just rode all out into the country. And I said, "Where are we going, Steve?" He said, "We're going to a prison." And I said, "What for?" He said, "Well, you're going to make a talk." I said, "Steve, I'm not making a talk in a prison." He said, "Well, yes, you are." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not." And so that's how my life began in going into prisons. I said, "Steve, I've spent thousands of dollars with good lawyers staying out of prisons. I'm not going in there, you know." And I went in and have loved every minute of it since then. So the book talks about never hesitate to go into the most dark and sordid spot on earth, that you'll be protected by the will of God, carrying the message. So anyway, I drank right on to where I drank up my wife and family. I'll tell you one quick story about the end of that. My wife came to me and she said, "You're just killing me and you're killing the family." And I went out and I've loved you and everything. You've been, other than your drinking, you've been a wonderful provider. If you just wouldn't drink, you'd be a model husband. And she said, "But I went out." And she said, "To be fair with you, all I want is half." I said, "Half?" So I went out to the boathouse. We were living up on the lake. And I had a tool shop down there and everything. So I got a chainsaw out. I love a chainsaw to this day. But anyway, I came back to the house. And I don't know if any of you have ever been in a house with a chainsaw running. It is the most frightening noise, even if it's just coasting. You know, guys that use a chainsaw, you know you got that trigger. You can go, you know, kind of like hitting the gas pedal. And it would speed up. It is an awful noise. And I asked her one more time, "You want half?" And she said, "Well, yes." She's scared to death. I started cutting. And so my idea was, I'll give her half. She wants half that couch, you get half. You want half of that dining room table, you get half. Bobby Jean's going to probably not like me anymore after this story. So in any case, I reckon I'd have cut that house in two if I hadn't broke the blade on the chain on that blade. we got to the bathroom, and we didn't have fiberglass tubs in that house. We had porcelain tubs. I was just getting ready to give her half that tub. The chainsaw just wrapped up on me. Anyway, that's not funny. I mean, what I'm telling you, I'm just telling you about my alcoholism. Let me tell you what God and the steps have done for me. We've got that same one son. We just got him home from Duke about a month ago. He spent 4.5 weeks up there with an illness. They didn't know what it was. I got upset with that. I mean, we were at Duke Hospital, one of the greatest university hospitals in the country, and you don't know what's wrong. So anyway, we just got our son back home on the way to recovery. We got 3 grandchildren. The oldest is a young boy that's 28 years old. He's a mechanical engineer. I got one granddaughter. She's 24. She's almost an RN, not quite, but she's almost done with that. And I got one grandson that's 16, and he's a triathlete at a young age and just doing real good. So we've been blessed with a remarkable family. Well, let me tell you how really blessed we are. About year 6 in my sobriety, we had an occasion to come back together, and I was there to make amends, and my ex-wife said, "Paige, let's pray together," and she took my hand. Now, I'm supposed to be, at 6 years sober, the prayer warrior, and I'm supposed to be initiating that action. My ex-wife, the same woman that I just scared to death with a chainsaw in her home, cutting up things that were near and dear to her, and she took my hand, and she said a prayer, and it was a prayer of forgiveness and a prayer of grace and mercy. Same mercy and grace that I got in AA. And to this day, now we're not married. She's married to a much better man than what she had. But to this day, we're at every event that those grandchildren have. We're at every event that my son has in his life. And we hug and kiss and love each other tremendously. Way more than we did when we were physically married, in that we were married to materialism back then. I was, and today we're close because of spiritual principles. God came into her life in a magical, powerful way, to sing somewhat similar to the way He came into my life. Anyway, so I get forced to go to this treatment center because of my drinking. I stole the company plane, went off on a trip, and didn't come back home. They had to explain to me that planes are to go out on and to come back on. If I want to go out and stay a long time, take the train. And so I didn't understand that in my drinking and so forth. They also explained to me that it wasn't just going off on the company plane, that they had a name for that. It was called skyjacking. That was serious then, it'd be serious tonight. Just as shooting the windows out of that National Guard armory was serious then, it'd be super serious tonight. So anyway, I got forced to go to AA and got met at the gate by men of AA. And I've been in the care of those men and women of AA ever since then. It's just been remarkable. We're in a fellowship that is the most unique fellowship in the world. I tried to carry the traditions to every area of my life, and one of the areas I went to them with, the steps and traditions, was back to work. And I've been trying to teach my son the 7th tradition for 40-some years, to be self-supporting through his own contributions, you know. We've got slow learners, you know, in that regard. So in any case, I was talking to one of our electrical engineers one day. He was talking to me about the problems in his marriage and his life. And he said, "Well, Paige, you just seem to be always okay and seem to always be peaceful. What are you doing when you say you go to meetings, and what are you doing to get that and everything?" And I went to my office and came back with this book. I keep one at work, and I started showing it to him and talking to him about it. We got to the 4th step, and started talking about taking that inventory, and then about after you got it done, doing a fifth step with someone that you trust, and making that load lighter. And so we were just talking on and on. We just talked for maybe an hour or so, then we went back to work. The next day, this guy comes in with about 8 or 9 sheets of paper. He'd written an inventory overnight. I've been working with some men 3 and 4 years trying to get them to do an inventory. My sponsor worked for me for 5 years to do an inventory. But anyway, overnight, this guy at work, an electrical engineer, did an inventory as good as I've ever heard, and did a fifth step with me. Today, they had a rocky marriage, beautiful young bride, and they were trying desperately to get to have a child. They tried everything that money and science could do, and came up empty. And so they started adopting children. So they adopted one little girl. She was about 7 when they got her. Then they adopted 2, a little brother and sister, and they were like 3 years old. They were twins. And then they got a newborn somehow or another. Well, I mean, that's not easy to do when you're in the adoption process. They were able to adopt a newborn baby. He was the caregiver to this woman who was homeless and husbandless and so forth. She didn't know who the husband was. So anyway, she was a street person, and she gave the baby up at birth. He and his wife had such a model history as being adopting parents that gave them this newborn. So here they are. They got this older girl, these 2 little twins, and this brand new baby. You would think they have a perfect family. Guess what happened? She had a baby. So now they got their own natural born baby. So they're a family of 5 children today. So anyway, I'm not claiming for him that his brief experience with the 4th and 5th steps made all that possible. But I do privately feel like it helped him some. It's how highly I regard AA and its spiritual principles. So in any case, I have had a remarkable life in AA. I've been overpaid in area of my life. When I say that at work, a lot of people say, "You sure are," and they think I'm talking about money, and it is part of it. I am overpaid financially. I stole most of my education. I stole my positions by going over you, not working with you, or going around you, and so forth. That's just how I was when I was drinking. And then physically, when I came to AA, I was bleeding for both ends. I'd go into the bathroom. It was almost like that decision. Get help, go to federal prison. I'd go to the bathroom and I wouldn't know what to do. I'm bleeding for both ends. I don't know whether to throw up or to sit down. And it was always that conflict. So, not funny again. so emotionally, I'd go up and down all day long with just whatever was happening. And when I'd be thinking about, I'd put my hand in my pocket and come out with a charge slip for somewhere I didn't know I'd been the night before, and I overspent what I had. And I got to steal from the company to pay for it, and so forth. So I'm full of fear all over again, and so forth. But mostly I'm overpaid spiritually because, number one, I had no relationship with God at all. In fact, I just would deny the existence of God, that I was such a self-made man, that I had survived Southeast Asia, nuclear submarine service, that career that I had put together, a broken marriage, all the arrest charges, all the trouble that drinking would get you into. I ended up in bars that if you didn't have a knife and a gun, they'd give you one, that kind of stuff. I just loved that fast life and fast women and drinking fast and hard. And so I had no relationship with God. So I read a little statement to you. I want to close with that I'd be you'd have a disappointing experience tonight if you didn't know what happened. So God is the source and the power. The textbook says, God is our source. May you find him now. Let me tell you where I found him. So 28 years ago, plus, I got that decision forced on my life, get help or go to prison. And I got 12 stepped by a man at the treatment center, and they talked to me. And what I heard, well, I didn't hear anything about not drinking. I didn't hear anything about these 12 steps or Alcoholics Anonymous. I know from knowing that man that he talked about that. But what I got from that was step 2. Step 2, our spiritual principle, is hope. I came in there to that meeting with him, hopeless, suffering from a sinless state of mind and body in a mighty way. And when I left there, I didn't know that, but when I left there, I felt lifted up. I felt like his presence had so calmed me and gave me hope. And then later I came to know that's our step of hope. Step 2, came to believe. And so without knowing what I was going to believe, I became willing, and I became open-minded, and I became open-hearted. And so I went home, and I spent those 3 days, I told you, that they gave me to think about it. On the morning of the 3rd day, the last day of my old life, I fell to the floor of the bedroom, wood floors, beautiful old wood floors in my home. I'm going to go home there tonight, late tonight. Same home. I still live in that same home. I'm going to go home. But the same floor I fell down to because I couldn't stand up. There wasn't a bone or muscle in my body. I just, bam, I'm down. I started crying. Now listen, I started crying, and I hadn't cried since I was a little kid, seeing his mom be beat to the floor, seeing his sisters and his brother beat to the floor. I've seen everything a man would not want to see in 2 years in Vietnam and about through the rest of my life of drinking. And even since then, I'm not virtuous to any kind of pain or suffering that can visit a man. I have personally broken every one of God's commandments. I have personally been forgiven for every one of those transgressions. And so I said, God, help me. That's all I said. I didn't ask him to help me get off the floor. I didn't ask him to help me quit crying. I didn't ask him to help me keep my job. I didn't ask him to help me with a problem I didn't know I had. I just said, God, help me. And in a few minutes, I was signing in admissions into a treatment center, which led to right here, and the friendship and the love and support of all of you. I thank you very much.